Hello. Thanks for having us, Max. It's kind of funny because it's almost the same for us. I mean, as far as the physicality of coming to work and not being around anyone, uh, that's it's almost like what we do normally anyway. So that part of it feels very much the same. But of course, with everything that's happening all over the world, it you know that part of it feels very different and sometimes makes it a little harder to focus. But I think we feel very grateful to be busy and working. So we're just kind of using that to kind of keep going. Well, what do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, for us, it's, we're always working isolated, not this isolated. And I think, without being around musicians and stuff, it's a little bit really like it feels super isolated. But as far as writing goes and feeling comfortable, it's not that far of a stretch. I think our favorite is working with a hybrid of things, using like organic elements mixed with electronic elements. So working with the orchestra, kind of blending in some sort of textural elements and different kind of scents and stuff to come up with unique sounds and palettes to give everything kind of its own unique sound. Is all that's probably our favorite, depending if it's sci-fi or drama. It doesn't really matter. It's always fun kind of blending those elements because it gives it a unique sound, even if it's just one sound with like a cello.
Yeah, and I love sitting at the piano. It never gets old. It's funny. It was my first instrument, and then as it became uncool when I was a young teenager, other things crept in, and now I find myself loving to sit at the piano again as I'm older. Usually usually what we'll do is Taylor and I will have a pretty in-depth conversation after we've read the script or spoken with the director, and from there we kind of just brainstorm ideas, and it could be anything. Like for Hush, I don't remember our initial conversation, but it was the specifics of it at least, but it was sort of regarding the fact that Maddie, you have a woman who can't hear things that are happening around her, uh, and we started with that element. Like how can we play? I mean, actually, Mike started with that element in wanting to use sound design and sound design coming and going and the sort of general soundscape to give a sense of urgency. And then what he said to Taylor and I was, I want all synthesizers for this score. So it was sort of on us to keep it sort of synth driven and fun without sounding like anything specific. Like he didn't want it to sound 80s, but he didn't want it to sound organic necessarily either. So in that case, for that film, the starting point was like, let's just start manipulating sounds from synthesizers and see sort of where we, see where we end up. And it was a fun journey. Taylor, I'll let you sort of speak more to it.
That film was very different than the others just because of what Andy already said, and the fact that nature was a big part of it. We really wanted to draw from nature. So we used a lot of wind chimes and bells that were processed so they didn't sound super pure and just stand alone, as they were. And then we used a couple of like acoustic guitar that was processed on a couple tracks. And then we used a lot of cold electronic elements, and we took a bird call and we kind of pitched it down, and we used all these kind of different arsenals of tools to give its own distinct sound to the characters and the environment, and obviously the fact that she can't hear, to play with that sort of interesting position that we were able to play with.
Taylor, you want to talk about Andy, the snake?
Yeah, I think obviously it's always the story that drives those ideas, and we're lucky to work with these really great directors and storytellers that kind of give us a really strong direction based off of the visuals and the characters. And for instance, in Doctor Sleep, we deliberately decided ahead of time that it wasn't going to be a very melodic score, because of the nature of The Shining and the way we wanted Doctor Sleep to be, and how we wanted to coexist between both films. And so Mike didn't want a bunch of melody, and but there was a couple places we were able to sneak it in. And one character was very I don't give anything away, but she had the ability to sort of hypnotize her victim, so to speak. And we use that kind of these balls that use for a hypnotist would use to kind of put someone under. And we use those kind of sounds and rhythmic elements that's very repetitive, and it makes you feel like you're slowly just losing your mind. And we added a slight bell melody to it, and that kind of became her motif that we played throughout every time she showed up and was kind of starting to do this and use that ability. And it's real simple, and it worked out really, really well. Before we even saw any visuals, we actually read the script, and we were like, oh, this is this character, and we had several ideas, and that was one of them. And when we played it for the director, he liked it, he loved it. So it worked out really well that the kind of, when you're reading a script or reading a book or seeing visuals, one kind of informs the other. Whether it's the wrong idea or the right idea, it definitely gives you an immediate, like, this is what I want to do, this is the concept. And I'm sure for Darth Vader, it's a march, and it's kind of the bad guys, and they were marching along, and I'm sure that definitely inspired Mr. Williams to kind of come up with that. And so we have movies that are the same way, and stories the same way, that inform us with one character's behavior or an ability, or sometimes a family. Sometimes the idea is a family or a house, or it could be several things. And I think it almost writes itself once you kind of open up yourself to the idea, well, what would this be like? What would this sound like? And I think that's the most creative part of this, is that sort of inspiration off of the art or the material that you're looking at. And I always get so excited when whatever project we're working on, those little elements are like, what is this going to be about? Or what is this going to be? We just came off of The Haunting of Bly Manor, and there's a whole bunch of things that we can't say right now, but it had a lot of those elements, and we were able to play with, and it's just so much fun, and it's so rewarding. I mean, don't you think?
Yeah, to add to something you said about being open to sort of that process, I think we find that every time. That's like, at the onset, we come up with some ideas in a general direction, like, let's do this for this reason. And I think that on that path, and I think this applies to anything, probably creative and non-creative, that you get going on a path, and then you are informed differently as you get down the road. Like, oh, we were going to take this trail to the top, but there's a bear here, so we should probably go off the trail. And then you go off the trail, and someone falls and breaks their leg, and now someone's not coming along with you. What you said, Taylor, is good, because like being open to the idea that your initial idea may or may not be where you end up. It's more about what happens between the start and the finish. I think everything in there is, I think, the magic spot.
And I think for a lot of composers, including myself, you start to become a little bit obsessed with the idea until it's totally flushed out. When you go to sleep, you're thinking about it. When you wake up, you might have thought of some solutions to maybe some problems that you encountered, and it just kind of sticks with you until you get it out. And then when you get it out, it feels like, it's therapeutic, and it's a bit healing. Even if it changes later on, or even if you ditch it, it's still like part of the process. It's very strange.
It's funny, we actually, the first episode we worked on was episode 6, because that episode had, I think they finished it quickly because it had the least amount of edits. I think there were only, I could be wrong, but I want to say there was only 4 edits and 4 or 5 edits in the entire episode. So they turned that over to us quickly, and that was the first episode that we worked on. And strangely, uh, it has no music in the first 40 minutes, 45 minutes. There's no music at all, and it's very story driven. It's a brilliant episode. We kind of were lucky to start on that episode because that episode then informed the early episodes a bit and where we wanted to go. And so during the process, we would always try to be aware of the arc of the story, and in that we would try to compose accordingly based on where we were. Obviously, as you get towards the end of the season, things become more disjointed. There's a lot of random percussion. Not random, actually. It's very specific as to where it is, but it's not continuous, I should say. And whereas at the beginning of the series, you have long, drawn-out themes that are just sort of very simple and sort of walk you through it. And then, as the season evolves, we would try new things, bigger arrangements, smaller arrangements. We're very lucky to, have Mike involved because he's very good about, hey, let's work on a cue for this scene, and we'll work on a cue and we'll all agree that it's working and it's serving the scene. And then he'll say, let's take it out. Hold on, let's take it out and see what happens. And then we take it out and we're all like, it's pretty good without it too, and so which is a real nice perspective to have. And he's always pretty spot on with that. So it's a very fun process. Taylor, I'll let you pick up on it, but I think it's funny, when Mike first told us that we were going to be working on this film, I think our initial reaction was excitement, and quickly followed by sheer terror because, it's a big deal, and we didn't want to make people angry. We wanted to do right by Stephen King. We wanted to do right by Kubrick, by Flanagan, wanted do what's right for the film. And it was challenging and scary, but at the end of the day, it was a lot of fun. We just, at a certain point, it's like, okay, stop. We're not scared anymore. Now let's just dive into this. And I think the biggest part of diving into it for the two of us was just our research. We were obviously huge fans of the film and the book, and diving in past just those to learn more about all of the music in The Shining and all of the story and the background and the film and how it was shot. We really sort of took our own history class on the original film. And then from there, after we had all that info, we kind of just decided to start, working on it. And luckily, I think the biggest part of it was to just not get in the way. That piece is has been famous all throughout history, even before The Shining. Berlioz, Bach. I want to say there's dozens of composers who have sort of referenced that lick that was actually written for the Catholic Church.
Oh, there is. John Williams.
John Williams, yeah. So a lot of it was us just sort of trying to, be sort of true to what Dr. Sleep was.
I think as you said, just preparation was a really big important deal, because before you decide, when you're dealing with a sequel and you didn't write the first one, you're dealing a lot with understanding where it started so you know where you're going. And I think it took a lot to understand, especially The Shining, to try to understand, to get into the mind frame of what everybody was thinking, and to understand it all sonically, melodically, and to see how you were going to introduce and not introduce that kind of stuff and the sequel, and how to expand upon it. And luckily, Mike is a very, very detailed director, and he knows what he wants to go for, and he specifically wants to do something here, something there, to kind of tell the story and to get the arc across, and it's brilliant. He's brilliant at that, and it makes our job always easier to at least know that we're not just floating in the ether. And I think once we knew what he was trying to tell and what he was trying to do, and we did all our research of the Shining, we knew sonically where this needed to be. And so we spent probably 2 months just on the sonics of the film. Everything was customized. It was sampled from giant wind harps and really interesting, unique instruments. And then there was an orchestral element and how we wanted to apply the orchestral elements and the melody from the first one. And you have to understand the original Shining, it was a little score and a lot of needle drops. So to make it even more complex, it was a lot of elements just thrown on top of each other. So we had to kind of dissect that and then decide what we wanted to expand upon and what we didn't. And that was a lot of fun for us. And Mike just let us go as far as we could, and he just pulled us back if we were to go too far. And as Andy said, initially we were super terrified after the excitement wore off, and then we just kind of you get into it. You have a job to do, and you need we've done, I don't know, 74 films or something like that right now, in 74 projects. And so it's like you have the tools and the ability, and you have to kind of trust in the process, and that's kind of what we did.